I call Mr. Graham Stewart to present his petition.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you also to Mr. Speaker for allowing so many of us to present our petitions this evening. In fact, 119 petitions have been returned from constituencies around the country. Usually, at the close of business, this House empties. Instead, this evening, it is filled up with colleagues coming to give a strong call from the countryside, a cry from the heart of England. And I'm delighted to see the Secretary of State and the Minister on the front bench to hear from us tonight. Madam Deputy Speaker, contrary to the myth, rural residents earn less on average than people in cities. They pay council tax, which is £76 per head higher, and yet they see urban areas receive 50% more per head, Madam Deputy Speaker, despite the obvious higher costs of delivering so many services in a rural area. So this really is a call on the government to make a change, and that's why all we ask is for a rural fair share. Madam Deputy Speaker, the petition states, the petition of the residents of Beverley and Holderness declares that the petitioners believe that the local government finance settlement is unfair to rural communities, notes that the rural penalty sees urban areas receive 50% more support per head than rural areas, despite higher costs in rural service delivery, and opposes the planned freezing of this inequity in the 2013-14 settlement for 6 years until 2020. The petitioners therefore request that the House of Commons urges the government to reduce the rural penalty in staged steps by at least 10% by 2020, and the petitioners remain, etc.
Petition Rural Fair Share campaign.
Sir Nick Harvey.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I rise to present a petition in the same terms on behalf of 1,671 of my North Devon constituents who are heartily sickened by this injustice and believe that a 10% improvement by 2020 is the very least that could be done.
Mr. John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I congratulate my honourable friend, the member from Beverley and Holderness, on this excellent campaign which he has launched. I'm handing in a petition on the same terms as his on behalf of a number of my constituents from the village of St Lawrence. However, they speak on behalf of all of the residents of the Malden district.
Daniel Kozinski.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to support my honourable friend and handing in a petition on the same terms of 71 signatories from my constituency of Shrewsbury and Outsham. The petitioners therefore request that the House of Commons urges the government to reduce the rural penalty in staged steps by at least 10% by 2020.
Mr. Brooks Newmark.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too am handing in a petition on the same terms for over 200 signatories from my constituency of Braintree. The petitioners therefore request that the House of Commons urges the government to reduce the rural penalty in staged steps by at least 10% by 2020.
Sir Edward Garnier.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I am also handing in a petition in the same terms as my honourable friend from Beverley, from a number of residents from my Harborough constituency.
Roberta Blackman Woods.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too am handing in a petition on the same terms for a number of signatories from my constituency of the City of Durham. And I should say, though it's the City of Durham, it's got a large rural area and critically is part of Durham County Council. And Durham County Council is a large rural authority and they want to see it have a rural fair share.
Cheryl Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I present this petition on behalf of a very large number of my constituents from South East Cornwall in the same terms as the honourable member, my friend, the member for Beverley and Holderness.
Dr. Liam Fox.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm handing in a petition on the same terms for 435 signatories from my constituency of North Somerset, and also in the same terms on behalf of 812 signatories from the constituency of Weston-super-Mare in pursuit of natural justice for the rural parts of this kingdom.
Stephen Phillips.
Thank
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to hand in a petition on the same terms as that presented by my honourable friend, the member for Beverley and Holderness, signed by 316 of my constituents in Sleaford and North Highton, and praying ever in the like terms.
Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the petitioners of North East Somerset echo Margaret Thatcher when she went to Europe and said, "We want our money back." They want their rural fair share in the same terms as my honourable friend, the member for Beverley and Holderness, and they present their petition with the greatest and humblest respect to this House.
Wonderful.
Andrea Ledson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm handing in a petition on the same terms as my honourable friend, the member for Beverley and Holderness, for 551 signatories from my constituency of South Northamptonshire, including representation from 29 villages.
Damien Hines.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too am handing in a petition on the same terms for a number of signatories from my constituency of East Hampshire. The petitioners therefore request that the House of Commons urges the government to reduce the rural penalty in stage steps by at least 10% by 2020.
Mr. Ian Liddell-Granger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm handing a petition on the same terms of 1,953 petitioners from my constituency of Bridgewater in West Somerset.
Annette Brooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm handing in a petition on the same terms from the Purbeck part of my constituency, Mid Dorset and North Poole, and other neighbouring Purbeck wards. The petitioners therefore request that the House of Commons urges the government to reduce the rural penalty in stage steps by at least 10% by 2020.
Miss Anne McIntosh.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to petition the House on behalf of residents of Thirsk and Malton, declaring that the petitioners believe that the local government finance settlement is unfair to rural communities, notes that the rural penalty sees urban areas receive 50% more support per head than rural areas, despite higher costs in rural service delivery. And it goes on, and the petitioners remain. And may it please the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Select Committee, which I have the honour to chair, has recently reported and received a very disappointing government response on the very same issue. So I hope we can link our report to these fair share petitions.
Sir Alan Beef.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to present signatures to this very important petition from my constituency, much of which is the most sparsely populated area of England, but suffers from being linked with a unitary authority and therefore having an even worse rural penalty for some of its rural areas. And I draw those matters to the attention of the Secretary of State as I bring the petition to the attention of the House.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's my pleasure to present a petition on the same terms as that presented by my honourable friend for Beverley and Holderness, signed by Mr. Peter Osborne and other residents of the villages of Minstead, Lyndhurst, Berkeley and Bramshaw in the New Forest East constituency, and requesting that the House of Commons urge the government to reduce the rural penalty in stage steps by at least 10% by 2020.
Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm handing in a petition on the same terms for 128 signatories from the beautiful town of Pershaw and the villages around Breeden Hill in my constituency of West Worcestershire.
Dr. Sarah Wollaston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm presenting a petition on the same terms on behalf of people from Loddeswell and Dartmouth in my constituency, where they speak for my entire constituency in recognising that the cost of providing services in rural areas is far higher and should be based on age, not deprivation.
Neil Parish.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I present this petition on behalf of the villages and towns of the constituency of Tiverton and Honiton. The petition therefore requests the House of Commons urge the government to reduce the rural penalty in stage steps by up to 10% by 2020, and it's delightful to see the Secretary of State and Minister here to deal with the matter.
Priti Patel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to present a petition in the same terms for a number of signatories from the wonderful village of Hatfield Peveril in my beautiful constituency of Witham.
Mr. Stephen O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too am presenting a petition on behalf of 490 residents of the Eddisbury constituency in Cheshire, representing, I'm totally confident, all the tens of thousands of rural and village residents in the Eddisbury parliamentary division, in the same terms as the Honourable Member for Beverley and Holderness.
Sarah Newton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'll be brief so that remaining colleagues get to present their petition. So I am handing in a petition or a number of my constituents from my very beautiful constituency of Trow and Falmouth in the same terms as that has been so well presented by my colleagues.
David Roughly.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm handing in this petition on the same terms for a considerable number of my constituents from the very great and very historic constituency of Bury St Edmunds in the county of Suffolk, in particular signatories from the villages around two towns, Needham Market and Stowmarket. The petitioners therefore request that the House of Commons urges the government to reduce the rural penalty in stage steps by at least 10% by 2020, and might I add, Madam Deputy Speaker, I trust that ministers will do a lot better than that.
Stephen Gilbert.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm handing in a petition on the same terms as my honourable friend, the member for Beverley and Holderness, and the 23 other honourable and right honourable members that have presented petitions tonight. My constituents, like those in the 119 constituencies that have had petitions submitted to the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, they simply want a fair deal.
Petition Rural Fair Share Campaign.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn. The question is that this House do now adjourn.